So before I go into details of the nerve innervation of the larynx, I would like to review the branches of the vagus nerve in the neck region first, because it is the nerve that the larynx heavily depends on. In the neck region, we care about two main branches of the vagus nerve, and they are the superior laryngeal nerve and the inferior laryngeal nerve. The inferior laryngeal nerve is actually the distal branch of the recurrent laryngeal nerve. So technically, you can also say that two main branches are the superior laryngeal nerve and the recurrent laryngeal nerve. But I chose to use the inferior laryngeal because it helps me memorize. Superior, inferior makes a lot of sense to me that way. Then the superior laryngeal nerve branches out into the external and internal laryngeal nerves. External for motor and the internal for sensory. The inferior laryngeal nerve does not branch, but has both motor and sensory functions. Now that we are familiar with these vagus branches linked to the larynx, let's look at what they actually innervate. And let's talk about motor first. The external laryngeal nerve comes down to specifically innervate one muscle in the larynx, and that is a cricothyroid muscle. And all the other laryngeal muscles are innervated by the inferior laryngeal nerve. For sensory, the internal laryngeal nerve comes down to pierce through the thyrohyoid membrane to give sensory innervation to the mucosa above the vocal folds. And the inferior laryngeal, the nerve that does both motor and sensory, innervates the sensation below the vocal folds. And one of the most important goals these nerves try to achieve is to control the vocal cords. A simple mechanism of opening and closing the vocal cords actually allows us to do a lot of things, such as adjusting the depth of breath, changing the volume and pitch of our speech, and even allowing us to cough, and so on. So damages to certain muscle innervation can impair our ability to perform these tasks, and consequences of these damage should be evaluated on an individual basis. But the principle is to look at what muscle is impaired by the nerve lesion, therefore knowing what effect it will have on the vocal folds. For example, a lesion to the external laryngeal nerve will paralyze the cricothyroid muscle, and this muscle inserts on the thyroid cartilage from the cricoid cartilage. So when it contracts, it rocks the thyroid forward, and the action tenses the vocal folds. A lesion, therefore, means one will have trouble tensing the vocal cords, so you expect that person to have inability to create high-pitched voices.